1, 2. Some dreams they dream, some dreams come true. What, 1, 2, 1, 2. Some dreams they dream, some dreams come true.
Everybody, welcome into the Body Movement Podcast. Here is our first guest episode recording with Sir Ed Latimore. I call him the Twitter assassin, the Twitter sniper, quote smith, former heavyweight boxer, 13-1-1 career. Now he's a public speaker, an author, a retired Army veteran. Are you a veteran? Do you consider yourself a veteran now?
Technically, I suppose,
Yeah.
but like I try to like not mention it in casual conversation because if somebody was
enough.
like in Iraq or some shit, I'm
Right.
like, hey man,
he served some time. He was in the Army. He now operates his own personal website, 50,000 or so unique viewers. He puts out a weekly newsletter, everything from mental health, physical fitness, personal finance, money, self-improvement, overcoming anxiety, addiction, cult following on Twitter, 150,000 followers, 200,000 across social. Ed, man, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, man. And, I've been following your work a little bit. Obviously, you got that cult following on Twitter. That's where I came across you. And it's just like, there's all this, and you've even said it, this motivation porn that's out there in the world today. And it's just like a bunch of people who have just led average careers quoting other successful people. And I come across a guy like you on Twitter, and it's like, you're putting out quotes and you're putting out motivational stuff, but they're your thoughts and they're from your experiences. And that is something that like you're not seeing from the world today. And it's like, this hits home a little bit more. This makes me think about what we're doing. Our podcast, to give you background, what we started is it's physical therapy. It's pain management. We're preaching to the world, take individual accountability over your health. We'll give you the tools because there's a lot of myths and a lot of bad practices in Western medicine, but there's things you can do as an individual. And I think your whole life is kind of built on that premise, which is why we wanted to have you as that guest. Do you feel that? Do you get that sentiment from your followers today that, man, this is some real shit? Like this is not this typical motivational stuff I'm seeing around every corner on social media. Like this is hitting home.
Well,
is that sentiment that hits home with you, with the people you're interacting every day out there talking to?
I would like to think so. And you have to remember something, and this is what I've kind of figured out to the point where I'm almost willing to bet on it at this point when I see it.
Yeah.
When you see a lot of regurgitated, recycled ideas, or you get the feeling that it's regurgitated and recycled, because we'll get to that. Because I'm sure I say a lot of things that no one else is, or I say a lot of things that everyone else or someone else has said at some point.
Right.
But why it doesn't come off that way
Yeah.
is you look at it through a filter of the work and the individual. I really pride myself on the fact that, like, I mean, you mentioned the Twitter, and that's great. But part of the reason why I grow on Twitter is, because you can go to Google and type my name in, and there's a bunch of things that come up. There's a whole life that's been led
Yep.
that I try to extract resources from, and people get interested enough to where people take note and they come and interview, and it just builds and builds and builds, and it slowly but surely becomes something I call the receipts. You get the receipts, and some people can see that you've lived the life.
Right.
And so it's not just, like I could say something super cheesy, and it'll resonate differently because I said it, right?
Yeah.
Or what happens more often, and you see this across a few people who also grow, I think, to my level or beyond, is that they have their own individual take and their own individual platform, but it's all individual, it's all unique, it's not generic. Yeah, I maintain that social media is closer to reality than I think a lot of people want to
I
admit,
I
because
agree.
because social media gets to be at first it's presented as kind of this escapism, right?
Yep.
But then you realize how you're living over here is identical, or at least is a mirror of how you're living in reality.
Yeah.
You
And
see that when with the people who are anonymous and stuff, the way like for example, versus people who are gonna put their name out there and things like that, and it just I think it ends up working out really well
yeah,
for people who put themselves out there.
I think people are starting to get that a little bit with social media. I just joined in the past year. I mean, I've been on LinkedIn. That's where we connected.
Hmm.
Um, I have my qualms with that platform, but it's been working for me. But I've seen that Twitter and Instagram, if you use them right, are the can be the most honest. And like you said, you put your name on it. I started my social media account and I'm stating my opinions, and I'm growing my base a little bit slower than yours, but it's me. It's like me as a man. I'm stating what I think about the world, or commenting and interacting with people like you that are doing it authentically. And when you get rid of the anonymity and that nature of it, it can really elevate you and open you up to making connections with other people. I think that's
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think I have
My,
a question to you as well. Like, so for me, what I've seen is I'm kind of like in the middle of that process where I'm gaining my own voice. However, I found it by quoting other people first. So, like, and for me, a lot of it's the science background, the research. Twitter for me, one of my mentors said the other day is like, it's like the New York Times to me. This, like, I can't live my life if I don't spend an hour on Twitter going through the science right now. So when I look at my Twitter following, like, or who I follow, it's those that are in the lead in the physical therapy or rehab careers.
hmm
And I'm like, what are they talking about? And it's just so tangible. And then me retweeting or me, on Facebook making comments has led to the ability to like lead to my own voice and lead to my own thoughts, which I feel, and Matt, you can probably see that in just the couple months of
Yeah,
being on Twitter. For me, it's like, okay, now I have something of my own to say based on all of these facts.
yeah, I'd really be interested on your thoughts with that, Ed, because it's did you just start like putting your thoughts out there and you gain that following, or somebody like me and Allison, like, again, I shunned social media. I thought it was all bullshit. I thought it was fake. I thought it was like this, everyone just putting on a front. And to find your own voice, the first thing I started doing is, I retweeted some people, or I posted a quote from somebody else that's successful because it resonated with me, even though it wasn't my own thoughts. And the more you interact, what I think Allison is saying, because Allison is like the reason we started this podcast, she's one of the most talented physical therapists I've come across. I'm biased, she's my sister, but every time I've had an issue, she's fixed it. So we have this message to get out. We're just not, I don't think we're sure how to do it. So how did you come to that fruition? Is it just by nature that and we'll get into your life story a little bit, but like, is it just because your life story is so interesting in overcoming that adversity that you just had a lot to say right away? Or did you start interacting and seeing how to use the tool first before you kind of blew up?
Well, it's both.
Yeah.
There's two components
Yeah.
to it, and once again, we're mirroring reality. So all of these things we talk about on social media works for networking in reality, and vice versa. So when you're trying to expand your awareness of your reputation, we'll call it marketing, whatever, you need the product, and then you need the the know how to work the channels to make people aware of the product. In other words, it does no good if you have a terrible product, but you have great channels for it, but vice versa. If you have a great product and no one knows about it, okay, you're still kind of in the same boat. At the very least, in that boat, you have a chance to recover and make strides. But it's not just, and I have a product about writing. It's not just
Yeah.
I have things to say. It's
That's right.
okay. I have to say these things. I mean, I say them in a certain way, certain
Mm-hmm.
presentation.
Yep.
And it's not major tweaks. It's not changing the content or the message behind it, but it's making it more engaging. It's understanding the fundamental nature of a network, which is
Yep.
you only grow in a network. I love like figuring out Twitter and SEO is what took me to understanding networks and things like Miller's theory. I think it's Miller's theory a little more. It talks about the power and strength of a network.
Mm.
Because if you want to take advantage of a network, you need to add more nodes to it. So that's
Yep.
your meta network, because every node has 2 to the n node power or increases, so it grows
That's right.
exponentially.
Yep.
But then you also want to have more connections to you. If you can have redundant connections, uh, then you're going to be in a really good position. And how does that translate to Twitter? Well, you want to interact with as many people as you can, at least initially.
Right.
And whether that be commenting so they can see you and they know you exist. And the algorithm works on this. So that's
Right.
also another reason why I think about these terms, because all they're doing is working on math and trying to figure out the best way to show people stuff.
That's right.
So you want to interact with people, you want to comment, quote, tweet, whatever.
Yeah.
And not everyone is going to play nice or share, but enough people will that over time you just build,
Yeah.
build, build, and then people start taking notice.
Yeah.
They go, okay, when the people who didn't pay attention to you at 100 followers pay attention to you at 1,000.
Yep.
People who didn't pay attention to you at 1,000 pay attention to you at 5.
Right.
People who didn't pay attention to you at 5, at 15, and so on.
Yeah.
And all it is doing is you just slowly but surely building a rep, building a strength, and building a name in the land.
Yep.
And people hate this, but everything in life is a popularity contest. Except popularity contests, those are about power for real. But
Yeah.
but when you realize that having more people behind you, that opens up a lot of doors and leverage. It doesn't make you more intelligent, doesn't make your position right or wrong, but it
No.
does put you in position to leverage it to do other things, talk to the people,
Yeah.
and it opens some doors, man. There's some people I have direct communication with that you would not think I should have that, but I have that
Yeah.
because of who I've been able to reach out to and see. And also, man, we're in a different world. I remember having an argument with this guy who was telling me that the value of college is in the network you build, and that's why you go to Ivy Leagues. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, but if I got some of the people I have direct access to on Twitter, and I know other people do, not so much. I just can't see it. And this is another beauty of social media. It's eroded those gatekeepers we were talking about. I think that was earlier, before we started on the show, but it's just made it easier to reach out. So to sum all that up, you have to have things to say, and that tends to come from expertise, which you have. And then you also have to understand the mechanisms of the medium you're working with. And Twitter largely rewards connections. In fact, it is probably, yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful network connection. If you watch the way your impressions grow along with your followers,
Yeah.
that tends to scale linearly or slightly inverse logarithmically. But your engagements, that scales almost
Yeah.
exponentially.
Yeah.
Almost, not quite, because
Right.
you
So
spend
yeah,
more.
so you had that, again, you kind of said it's both, like it's that parallel path running over here where you are engaging, but over here you're interacting with the people you want, and
Yeah.
that will, regardless of algorithms in the math, there's a level of authenticity that starts to come out of your account because
Right.
you're interacting with the people. And I think really what you touched on there too is, this is something me and Allison are very prominent about. It's, you're also curious, right?
I try to be.
Yeah, right. Well, I want to get into your background. So it's like, by being curious, that is natural engagement, because it doesn't have to be reposts and retweets, but it could be questions and back and forth. And that's where you get the learning, which again, on Twitter, it's the snippets that then say, all right, I'm going to go over here and research this. I'm going to look more into this because this is fascinating. That opened up a new part of my brain that I didn't think I was using, or a topic that I didn't think that I thought I was knowledgeable on, but I'm not. And now through this interaction in my network, I can learn more about it because they've pointed me to some great research or whatever it may be. Right. And that curiosity is what I want to touch on, because, I watched your podcast with Dilbert creator Scott Adams from a few months ago. How smart is that guy?
Yeah,
Um,
he's really cool, man. Very down to earth. Another connection you make.
yeah,
That's all from Twitter, man.
I
I don't know
know,
that guy in
I
person.
know.
Never met him in person.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a guy who's, more money than David Crockett, successful businessman. Now he's a political thinker. He's got a huge platform. He's his own boss, and he just kind of came across you, and he's just like, man, this guy's thinking about life
Yeah.
correctly and wanting to connect with you. And the interesting thing he mentioned, because I like following him. He talked about your background, and he uses the word talent stack, and how your background is so unique. You're a competitive chess player. You're a retired boxer. You joined the army. You got a BA in physics. I think you're still tutoring from time to time when called upon.
Occasionally, man.
Yeah, right. You're writing books. You got your personal website, and then you're growing this social media thing. And then you've had a background of hardship and addiction, and you've overcome. And like all of those things individually of themselves do not seem to pair well together. But as he
No.
was saying, if you figure out a way to put them all together, it becomes this really interesting story, background, and insight, which is what led me to reach out to you, because it's like you got this unique lens, view, and world perspective. Um, I think that's something our followers, and somebody like me, I have a lot of interest in a lot of different things. Um, Podcasting, fitness, health, background, math, and I have my MBA, so I'm good. I'm big with data and data science and data modeling. Um, Putting those all together, it's like my whole career being in corporate America, finally breaking away and doing things like this. It's like, how does somebody like you take all of that and then be like, you know what, this is what I have to offer the world, and individually, none of these things seem to make sense to pair together and offer to the world, a perspective. But you've kind of bundled this, and I don't see a lot of people. You see a lot of people like Gary Vee or Tim Cook or Steve Jobs. They had this laser focus on one thing, where you have this unique background of everything. And I think that's somewhere society, we're in this place where people have all these interests and don't know where to focus. But you've been able to bring all these different focuses into one package, and it's like, how the hell do you do that? Because I think people are wrongfully thinking, I got to have this laser focus, I got to do this one thing and be great at this one thing, and that will lead to other things. And it's like, no, you can be this jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife with this unique background, and package it all into one thing. It's just harder to do because less people are doing it.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, how did you, it's almost like, how did you get to where you are today? Like, how did you figure that out to package all these things the way that you do?
Well, you have to remember that everything comes with a trade-off, right? I
Right.
mean, the trade-off is that perhaps I don't become world class at anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm middling at best at a few things, and that comes with its own weaknesses. Because when you're world class at something, anything, especially in the tournament game format,
Yeah.
I can never remember the exact economic term for it, but I think tournament game is it, where the accolades for first place are so disproportionate that, like, yeah, it tends to pay to be in the top. But the trade-off is, maybe I never get there, but I get to express myself in other ways, and it's about what's important to me. What was important to me is freedom to pursue what I find
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
And so my entire life has been kind of built around those values. Even with the sobriety,
Yeah.
one of the big reasons is that I said this is going to inhibit, if I continue down the path I'm going, it'll inhibit my ability to enjoy life. Because to be curious and to enjoy what you want to enjoy, you got to have some money, and you got to have a means to live.
Yeah.
You don't have to be rich or anything, but you certainly can't. I think life is going to be very hard if I'm stuck making, $12 an hour for the rest of my days. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it just doesn't align with my goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all I'm thinking about is how can I pursue what's interesting to me. And then what was interesting to me, it was physics. Right now it's linguistics, but the difference is, now that I've gone through the college machine,
Yeah.
um And I always thought college was foolish. I just thought that it was the kind of the best way at the time to me.
Yep.
Right now, I'm doing crash course videos on YouTube and taking my own notes and build my own kind of a plan and studying
Yep.
stuff. But
Yep.
that was what was interesting when it was physics and math and all that. That was interesting. In fact, I made a choice during my studies. I was originally going to go to school for engineering, and I was pursuing that path for engineering. And I said, I'm not. But when I found physics, I thought physics was so much more interesting, even though the job market was not. There's no job physicist, right? There are plenty of engineers. Instead,
Mhm.
what physicists tend to do, maybe this reflects my thinking, is they take their skills and they apply them in other places, and they come up with a fresh perspective and a way to think about data and phenomena that most people don't have, almost specifically because of their singular focus. But in physics, I mean, she walk away with a math minor, like one credit away from a chem minor. You get a lot of writing.
Yeah.
It's very well rounded but intense education.
Right.
And I didn't know what I was going to do with that or anything, but I just knew that okay, now I'm here and now I have a skill, and I always liked writing, so I pursued writing the whole time.
Yeah.
I had started boxing, and I tried to go as far as I could with fighting, and
Yep.
some of this stuff is necessity too. Like I joined the army because I needed money for school. It
Right.
just so happened to expose me to an even deeper level of electronics,
Yeah.
and it worked really well with physics. But that wasn't an accident, that part, because I got to choose my MOS. And I said, okay, here's what I'm going back to school for. Let me synchronize that with my MOS. So there's efficiency and so, but for the most part, how I get, or how I've gotten all of these this well-roundedness, that, or at least it appears to be so, is I really just follow what I'm interested in, and I try to set my life up to where I can do that. Like,
Yeah.
well, the last year, at the end of the last year, in October, what was it, September, October, November, I had an intensive Spanish class, like 2 hours a day on Skype. Just and now it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not fluent,
Right.
but I can think and communicate and listen and hear the language, and
Yeah.
now it's stuck in my brain, and I'm doing the same, well, something similar, because the Slavic system is very different.
Yep.
Uh, Doing the same thing with Russian, right? Like I said,
Yep.
now my interest are languages right now. When that
That's right.
fades, it'll be something else. But then what'll happen is, I'll be sitting there, and some 40 something old guy, and people be and people are like, oh man, these languages, like, and it must be cool. I'm like, well, you got to remember, man, I've been on this planet for decades. Right? I've
That's right.
been following different
Yep.
interests,
Yep.
and they'll look at the blog and see all these posts, and like, well, you got to remember, I'm writing 8 years, and well, more. This has been 8 years now. Uh,
Yeah.
all of these things is just a function of time, plus me being able to pursue what I'm interested in, and so
Yeah.
I think if a person can do that and do it, and you gotta have you do need a certain level of curiosity, because some people, all they want to do is play, like, the video games, Netflix. That's like a great goal for them. Like, if I can, they're like, how can I maximize my Netflix viewing time? When's the new
Yeah.
PS5 coming? Like, that's some
Yeah.
people's goal, and if that's your goal, all the more power to you. It's not mine. What I'm trying to do is
No.
use maximize my time
Yeah.
to to
Well, I mean,
travel
dude,
or
you
what.
seen you seen like during when Corona hit, dude, like the streaming numbers that went up and the amount of
It went
subscriptions,
crazy.
it went off the
Me,
charts. And that's during that time, my sister here quit her job being a part of like an accredited healthcare practice, went out and started her own. I said
right?
we should start a podcast. I said like I got on social like that's the driving individual accountability is like what our podcast is going to be driven off of. And like right there you just said like I don't I can't relate to that mindset anymore.
Well, I think like for
Yeah.
me, like the last year, so kind of moving, like a lot of things that you said hit home with me is like the freedom and like the freedom to think. So
Yeah,
when I was, well, we won't even call it 9 to 5, when I was in a position where it was all day, every day, and there was so much thrown at me, I had ideas, but I didn't have energy to act on them. So when you have that freedom and your mind just floats, you're like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. And that if you're exhausted or not taking care of yourself, you don't even have those thoughts, I don't think, because you can't. There's only so much space that one has. There's a great book, I think, Matt, maybe I mentioned to you, but it's called Range by David Epstein. And it talks
That sounds
about,
so familiar.
yeah, the opening story is the comparison between Tiger Woods and Roger Federer, and how only prodigies are the ones that stories are told. Like started golfing at age 2, hitting out of sand twaps at age 4. Like,
Right.
So they were, so it compares, and like you see that, and like so all of a sudden everybody thinks you need to have this laser focus. And the same thing with schools and institutions. That's what you do. Suddenly you go in, you're like, well, what's your focus? And when you're 18 years old, you're like, I don't know. And
Right.
then you look at somebody like Federer's upbringing. And this is literally, I think, the first chapter in his book. And it talks about how his parents, even at the age of 14, were like, don't just play tennis. What are you doing? Like, play everything. And he liked things with a ball and a racket, and he liked things with a ball, quite frankly. And they're like, learn everything. And it transitions, like a kicking a ball does transition to a tennis swing. It's the same athletic position. It's the same transfer of movement. It's the same this and that. So even though you're focusing on different things, you're building this well-rounded creature who, can succeed wherever you are, versus all of a sudden something falls out. And 2020 was the perfect example for many people of that. Your one system is no more. What do you got? So, and Range, so it's a great book. It really talks a lot about that.
Vasily Lomachenko, the boxer, there's a documentary about him. And one of the things that his father did, he said, no, we're not going to box. I think he had him doing dance and soccer and other things.
Yeah.
And then I think at 14, he was like, all right, you really still want to do this? Let's go. And that's when he started training.
Yeah.
And there's really something to be said about building a diverse base to rest on. You don't have to go do everything, but you should be able to do a few vital interesting things, wherever you choose to specialize,
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
like
think
having that generalist thing first. And and that goes into like kids sports specialization. If they're doing that before teenager, like before 14, 15, the chances of them burning out and succeeding drastically increases if they've specialized young. Versus if they've been doing all this, they're mentally better, they're physically better, they don't feel the pressures from everybody. And there is a time and place for specializing, right? Like it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill. That is like, it is what it is. So if you need to focus on that if you want to be elite in something, but that's a leader. Like
That's
after
right.
you have that.
If you're spreading those hours out, younger, you're going to get to that 10,000. And by the age of 14, you can
eventually,
you can eventually hit
and
that.
the movement, of course, that's where I go. I mean, movement to me is just it's still a mental thing, because it's ingrained patterns, just like any habits are. But from a sports side, like you're ingraining the transition of force, you're ingraining a movement, you're ingraining a discipline in playing, you're ingraining team. So that doesn't change, just the specific skill changes. And I do think that carries over to a lot of life things too.
Yeah. And I think it's a good transition, because Ed, you talked about, and again, this was on a few podcasts that I've seen of yours, and again, it was with Scott, but he was talking about like, so how can people take that approach in anything to kind of get their mind in that right pathway? And to you said that boxing and fitness was a way that opened up your way of finding discipline and just learning how to. In boxing, you started so late, dude. It's kind of an incredible story. Like you talk about like starting professional boxing at 23. I don't know.
And to be fair, I didn't start professional boxing at that point. I started as an amateur.
Yeah.
Because I did my research before I started fighting.
Yeah.
And boxing is unique in that anyone can deem themselves a professional. You just go, you fill out the paperwork.
Right.
And the minute you and you're an amateur until, and this is key, you're an amateur until that bell rings and you take that, and you're in there to go, right?
Right.
Anytime that point you can decide you don't want to, and you're still eligible to fight as an
Mm.
amateur.
Okay.
But once you fight pro, you can't turn amateur. So I said, let me do amateur, because I realized that you need to learn and develop. And I wasn't so arrogant to think I was just gonna come in and do great. Like, no, I went and put my amateur career together. And
Yeah.
without knowing this, right,
Yep.
it's not as uncommon as you think, at least in the heavyweight division, for guys to start a little later in life. I think Deontay Waters started around the same age that I did, maybe a little older.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Anthony Joshua didn't start out. I don't think he started till he was like 19,
Okay.
18 or 19.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because to be a heavyweight, you need time for your body to put on that kind of muscle and
Yeah.
size. You
For
don't just
sure. For
every
sure.
if you're boxing from childhood, you're not going to be a heavyweight. At the very least, you're not going to
Mm.
start as one.
Right.
You just There's just no way. Not
Yeah.
not with the
Yeah.
problem, unless you're like freaking 6, 7 out the gate, like the Klitschko's,
You
right?
could, yeah, or probably Tyson Fury, right? Like guys
Right.
like that.
I'm sure Tyson Fury was never
Yeah.
a cruiser. He
Right.
came out the
Right. Right.
wound
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
heavyweight.
Yeah.
For the most part, yeah. A lot of us as heavyweights start a little later. So I don't think what I did was like that unusual. Certainly relatively unusual
That's
across the whole spectrum.
exactly, dude. Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah. And then by the time, the time you hit the circuit officially, like,
right. I
you
had
were,
now what I had did as an amateur, certainly with my size disadvantage, and that's so weird to even say because I'm not a small human, but being only 6'1", that is small for heavyweight, and there
yeah,
is a
it's,
lot that was that I did as an amateur, and I'm really proud of my
yeah.
that point in my life, and what I was able to really accomplish. We'll say in spite of the resources around me and my
Right.
level of initial skill when I started and everything.
Yeah, but I think what you touched on in that interview with Scott was that pathway of getting into shape, finding a discipline, starting from scratch, not knowing anything about it, and then, not getting to the top or the pinnacle, but getting into the profession with other
Yeah.
top elites.
Really, yeah. I mean,
That opened up the learning pathway for you that you've applied to writing, self-discipline, sobriety, and other things. It's finding that one skill and saying, and having that unique look that, okay, even though this is a totally different skill set that I have, going from scratch to this shows that I can learn something from nothing and go to
right.
greatness. And applying that to everything you've been doing, I think was a lesson that you kind of touched on in that interview, that resonated with me. So when I was asking you earlier, like, how do you put all these things together? It's like, well, if you do find that one thing that you are good at, but then you have curiosity in other areas, even though it might be a different skill set, you can pursue it and learn it because those habits are built. And I think
Yeah.
that's something you touched on.
And it really is. Yeah, I talk about this in some articles and speeches or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the the path for me in boxing, going from like nothing and really being uncoordinated and just kind of a mess, uh, to becoming, coordinated together or where a student of the game and all that. That's a process. It takes time, investment, a lot of pain,
Right.
decent amount of sacrifice, and all that. But what you get, I mean, you get to see, because what you could the direct thing you get, the thing that I don't think is of as much value, but everyone puts weight on it, my to say I boxed, right? That's whatever, right? Most people don't care, but the mindset and the approach to problem solving and difficulty,
Yeah.
you can't buy that. You can't even teach it. I think it can only be learned, and it
Right.
can only be learned by doing something extremely difficult with a lot of limitation. I mean, because it's not like the training's miserable. It's
Right.
made even worse because I was poor during most of my training,
Yeah.
and that sucks. Not just because you got to figure out how you're going to eat, but you got the stress of working and living.
Yeah.
And there was probably a time, I can't remember exactly how long, where I didn't have health insurance. There's that can be problematic. Right, but you're not really thinking about that because you're like, okay, what can I do to get better? There was a time where I had to drive to the gym because the gym I was going to was a driving distance away, and I had just got my driver's license suspended. The car I had could not pass inspection. I could not afford insurance.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
I get pulled over, I am going to jail. At the very least, I am walking home and
Yeah.
getting or well, probably going to jail. But I figured out that I had to do it, so I just drove really intelligently and got used to looking behind me for cars and everything.
Yeah.
And I tell this story not to show that, oh man, I was willing to do anything to fight, and that's how it turns out. Well, the direct result of that action, you want to talk about direct result, because I changed gym trainers from who I was with most of my time as an amateur to the guy I ended up finishing out my pro career, all my pro career and the remainder of my amateur career with, was
Yeah.
Tom Yankello. Um, and I'm very, very fortunate that Tom happens to live driving distance away, but a ways that I could get to him. I
Yeah.
tell that story because I started training with him. Because I started training with him, I got to the national Golden Gloves. I won the state title. I got to the national, and at the national, I defeated Dominic Brazil in the first round, who goes on to represent us in the Olympics and has had a great career. But because I beat him, the people who were investing in his career decided to invest in the remainder of my amateur career, which was great because you want to talk about like timing. I remember when I finally, so when I went to National Golden Gloves, and that was like, in fact, that was like that week. Easter was that week. I just remember that, right? Uh, but my unemployment ran out while I was there, and I didn't know that. I was trying to buy drinks at the bar. I was like, okay, right, and there's how responsible, right, buying drinks from unemployment money.
There
But
you
I was
go.
celebrating for that,
Right.
and I didn't have the money to pay for rent or anything because my unemployment got cut off, and I was like, oh, this is nuts. So when they were like, "Hey, we love for you to come out to LA and we'll pay you," I was like, "I am on my packed everything," but I
Right.
wouldn't have been able to have that opportunity
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
if I had not taken that risk and that small risk. Okay, now I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, I don't know if I do that, but it was a risk I took because I said, how else am I going to get better? I said, I know I'm not going to get better here,
Yep.
and I done put all this energy in the boxing, so I take these little
Yeah.
risks, make these little sacrifices, and they pay off. They
That's
pay
right.
off, it's that seeing that I'm like, okay, if I did that, how hard can getting a physics degree be, right?
Right.
Uh, how rough can this sobriety thing be? We'll figure that out. How
Yeah.
hard can it be to grow
Yeah.
this website? No one's hitting me in the face. I'm not as
Right.
poor,
Right.
not running from the law, right?
Right.
It's all these other little hardships,
Yeah.
as we say in fighting, turns the noise down on the rest of life. So you're able
Mm.
to focus, hone in, and it's not so hard and not so challenging.
Yeah.
All right, so I have a question. So I am my second boxing lesson in. I just started
Nice.
boxing.
She
I
just
got my
started.
gloves
Yeah.
over here. So my first one, I didn't even put the gloves on, and my footwork through a ladder was the focus. And then the second one, I started hitting things, and the one word that resonated me with the most with the training was relax. And I was
Yeah.
like, what the fuck? Relax. I'm trying to punch things. And so maybe from somebody who's well more versed here from the discipline side of boxing, I can already see it in me will change my perspective on things. Cause it's like right when you're supposed to be gearing up, my trainer's telling me to relax. And I'm like,
Right.
what do you mean? Like I'm like up like this, and he
Yeah.
he's like stop. Like he'll just put the mitts down and be like, nope, you're not going after anything right now. So I don't know. Like to me, that was a very enlightening day. It was just earlier this week, and it was just like, wow, like I can see, and now I'm totally invested in it because I can see how it will transition to other things I'm doing. Just
We have a
that discipline of training is just messing with my brain right now.
we have a very inverted relationship with outcome and effort. And
Totally.
you know,
Oh my God, yeah.
It's totally.
I,
Yes.
I think most people think along the lines of pure linear thought. If doing this causes that, doing more of this will cause more of that. But reality is not so linear. Reality very often is kind of an optimization curve, right? Too
Yeah.
little effort, nothing will get done. Too
Yeah.
much effort, you start to cannibalize your own energy,
Yeah.
and it,
Yep.
instead of it being transferred into what you're trying to do, it gets diverted back into you, and it is not it's not a reaction that you feed on, it's one that attacks. So what we learn in fighting a lot of times is, I mean, I got the same thing, and you think it's hard hitting a bag. You got to learn how to do this against a moving target that is trying to hurt you, and it's really been trained to hurt you. So, and you
What?
have to stay calm. But that's
Yeah.
that's the real benefit of boxing, that you learn how to stay calm in these situations. That, like, even when
Yeah.
I lost, people don't understand. Even when I got hurt and I'm sitting here reeling in my balance up, watch the video,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, I'm in bad shape. I'm
Yeah.
not nervous because I'm like, okay, because I know, of all things to do by that point, I know that's the last thing to do is panic. Right.
Right.
So that's left to my mindset. And that tends to show up in other areas of your life.
Yeah.
That panic, that heightened state, there's nothing you can do with it. Pushing harder, when a lot of times you need a greater amount of impact as opposed to a longer amount, is a thought process. You stop looking for ways to work harder and work more impactfully instead. I'm not a big fan of working smarter, because, or rather, that contrast of work harder versus work smarter. I'm a,
Right.
I like the idea of work more impactfully than work harder, because sometimes uh,
Yeah.
the returns are asymmetrical. At this point, putting this much effort in, it seems like hard work. You only get a 1-to-1. You put
Yeah.
a little more in, and it jumps to freaking 5-to-1, 10-to-1.
Yeah.
But you don't know that. So you want to find the greatest impact. Other times you
Right.
do got to pull off a little. Okay, so,
Yeah.
like, that is just amazing that you're getting to experience that with that relaxation. Because even when you spar, you have to. Well, I'll never forget the first fight I lost as an amateur. No, it was the second one. First or second. I remember the guy I fought because we're friends and everything. Um, but I was so exhausted because I hadn't learned how to manage my energy and push my attack. I just learned to go push and attack, right?
Yeah.
And whatever happens, it hit him and he'll fall. But he just defended, relaxed, defended, waited till the second round and started, or the third round and started fighting back. And I was like, oh, this is crazy, because I'm exhausted because I didn't manage my energy. I just pushed against this
He did like a
this
junior rope
object.
a dope on you, huh?
Pretty much,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
But it's a good lesson.
Yeah.
And back to what I was saying about not turning pro early. Imagine learning that lesson as a professional. No, you learn it as an amateur, and then you
Right.
you step
Right.
up, and you end up being able to do a lot better than you would have otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the mental capacity and the discipline, it just is blowing my mind. Like I said, it's just like,
Yeah.
doing something, and we're up, and like we're going under, and he's going, under and swinging his right hand, and I just walk right into it. And I'm like, I'm fucking dead. I just died. Like, and he's like, you gotta focus. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
holy shit.
It's
I'm like,
really
I'm like,
it's
I
really
I
great.
am dead right now. Like, you hit me with a mitt. I felt it. What the fuck?
We don't have anything in the world for, like, I'll say, like, civilians, that is even close to what's required of you to do well in boxing.
Unreal.
Well, you can go hit the bag. Anybody can hit a bag, get
Yeah.
some hits, whatever. But to endure training, like, and
Yeah.
what I'll say, training is preparation for a fight,
Yeah.
and preparation in such a manner where there is at least a 40% chance you could win. Right?
Right.
I don't say 50, because that's, the sometimes, you're just outmatched,
Right.
and there's nothing you can do. But I'm a big fan of 100% effort to get you to at least a 40% chance of victory. That means that no matter who you fight, you'll put your forth a good effort, and he's still got to be cautious.
Yeah.
4 of 10. And
That's right.
like when people ask me like, who do you think is going to win this fight? I say if they fought 10 times, right? That's what I always say
Mm-hmm.
because I know it's any given night, man. Anything could happen. A shot could land the wrong way.
Yep.
Or the right way, and
Yep.
they're not expecting it and they just
Yep.
can't recover. But to that whole point, when you're trying to when you're trying to do this thing up here in your mind and with your body and under duress and under threat
Yeah.
and exhausted,
Yeah.
you can't work through that. You have to, and you can't think through it. You can't just willpower through it. It's like this. I wish I knew the word, if there is a word. You have to do all of this and do it continually, and that does eat up energy. But it's great. It's a great feeling because when you conquer, when you get through it, you're like, oh, I did it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Um, and that, dude, and that's the mindset that I think you said to make yourself the most impactful, right? It's like
Yeah.
you got to get to that place. And I think that that pathway translates to like everything what you're doing in your writing and what people are doing in their careers and business. It's like they think that pushing harder on this bullshit over here is what's important and that's going hard, and it could be, oh, my email inbox is always at zero, I respond to every email, and it's like that's not important.
Right.
It's like responding to the right ones, it's focusing on the right things. And I think ours being a health and wellness podcast, it's like you'll learn that mindset to a lesser degree that you do through boxing and sparring with that person, to find a discipline to say I'm seeing instant ROI on investing in my body, investing in myself, and getting to this place of discipline that should translate to other places in my life where I was like, okay, like I don't need to focus on this. This is not impactful. This is noise. This is important. There's so much with podcasts and streaming and distractions
Yep.
out there that people are focused on the wrong shit all the time. And it's like, dude, just like create, like find, I don't want to say find your passion because that's wrong too. It's like find the thing that is valuable to somebody else and get better at that thing and put your effort into that. And if you have that calm mindset to do, I think that's where somebody like your career like manifested out, and it's exaggerated because you went through something so impactful like boxing.
Yeah. And you mentioned something else I want to touch on. It's picking those things to do and really try to excel and kick
Yeah,
off on it. We were talking about Twitter earlier, and I get people that talk to me about Twitter, and they want to know how to grow, and they want retweets and stuff. And I'm like, you got to understand, your issue, like your issue right now is not the retweet. Your issue is the quality of writing. Your writing sucks because you haven't lived. So you need to go live, get some perspective, get an experience, get something,
yeah,
get some substance to your words.
yeah,
And then at that point, you'll be surprised what happens. You won't come to me asking for retweets because you'll grown. When of all the people I've worked with, they're you can just see the difference between someone
yeah,
who is 25 and someone who's 35.
yeah,
It's to the point where like I can look at it and you just get better at screening about who you work with. Because one
yeah,
of the things I do is I help people grow, and I
yeah,
look and I go, I really like you gotta understand it hurts me to turn down money, but it would hurt me even more to have someone waste it and then come back and say that I didn't do my job. And I'm gonna let you know right now, uh, you're not quite ready for us to work together. That's what I say. Like you're not.
yeah,
I can't do anything for you yet.
yeah,
You know.
yeah, yeah.
And once they some of them get it, some of them don't. But the
Right.
but the point is, I'm not. I've removed the liability, and I removed the liability because I'm looking at what they have to say, and it's back to that read that
Yeah.
it's a lot of regurgitation of the same ideas, no fresh perspective, no
Right.
experience to filter through.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, with our podcast, we're just getting going. And like I told Allison, like, I don't care if we get 50 views on YouTube right now. I was like, I want those 50 to love it. I want those 50 to take something away from it, but I'm not going to just go chase somebody to pack the stats. It's just like, let's be patient. We have the value. We just got to figure out how to get that message out. I think we have the message. I think we are interesting. But we're not gonna just chase it to chase it. It's and I
Right.
think and I think that's kind of what you're hitting on here. It's like people look at the stats and they look at the CompuBox and they're like, oh, that dude won the fight because he like landed more punches. And it's like, no, dude, that dude clocked that guy 5 times more than the other one. The other one just got some light jabs in that
Yeah.
punch count. So I think that's what we're hitting right now. It's like that quality over quantity, add the
Yeah,
value, and it will come.
generally speaking, right? I mean, obviously, there are things and tactics you can do to implement your strategy
Of course.
more rapidly,
Of course.
but generally speaking, uh, as long as you add value over time and do nothing else but that,
Yeah.
you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
things are gonna work out.
Yeah.
Uh, it's like I say, tactics without victory is the slow is the noise before defeat.
Right.
Strategy without tactics is the slow way to victory. Is like
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so like as long as you have the right, and I think I got that from the Art of War, by the way, in case you're wondering where that came from.
I just bought that a couple weeks ago. I haven't read it yet.
Great little read through.
Of
But
course.
one of the main ideas where I got that from, or why I like that, is that it highlights the power of having a plan over reaction.
Yeah.
And a strategy is a general plan. Tactics tend to be reactionary. So
Mhm.
if you're only reacting without a plan, you are doomed to fail. If you're only planning without really reacting,
Yeah.
you'll eventually get there. Assuming you make some moves, it's going to take a long time. Now, of
Yeah.
course, ideal is both, but
Correct. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Um, the hedge fund manager, CEO, founder, Ray Dalio.
principles. I'm a big fan of that.
You love that, but yeah, I mean, he talks about that, right? It's like you have to put the plan together, but then test and learn. Um,
Yeah.
is that like if you're looking at that's when the tactics come in after you put a thorough strategy together, after you believe in yourself, then problems will arise. It's like audibling at the line of scrimmage or whatever. You're figuring out your opponent switched up his game plan and he's not fighting the way you saw him on film. You got to adjust halfway
Right.
through. It's that same thing of evaluating. Okay, the strategy is good on its surface, but there's some tweaks we got to make, and it's a constant cycle. You make the tweaks, you see how it works, and you go back again. But that underlying strategy, she can really never really fundamentally change.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
and
great.
then that's why the people who the more you know, typically that comes from experience.
Yeah,
So we'll say the
yeah,
more you've experienced to distinguish,
yeah,
and when you have a great level of experience, you're able to adjust to
yeah,
issues and adjust to problems,
yeah,
not only more quickly
yeah,
but with greater efficacy.
yeah,
So like you know. Well, what's the old saying, right? You can plan the picnic, but you can't, plan the weather. Well, that's cool.
yeah.
What
Right.
you do? Are you gonna get rained out, or did you bring a parasol or something? That
For
kind of
sure,
deal.
for sure.
An experienced person is gonna be able to look at the weather and know, and
Yeah,
if they're caught by surprise,
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah. All right, man. So look, I think we're getting to the end. I'd like to touch a little bit on it because a couple of your books, Allison's reading right now. She bought. I didn't want to read it yet because I just wanted to talk naturally with you without having like a pre-planned
Oh,
conversation. But she bought not caring what other people think is a superpower, and
ah, thank you.
um, and I think she's going to start implementing some of your tips. I think she's going to start running a mile and a half this whole month every day.
I
Amazing.
well,
Yeah,
I appreciate. You know what's funny about that book, man?
yeah,
Here's a valuable lesson
yeah,
to any would-be creators.
yeah,
If you have an idea, you don't need everything to be perfect. you just need it to be, you don't need a 10. You can go pretty far with a 7.
Hmm.
And a 10 would be what I had when I wrote the next book, Sober Letters, and it's going to be what I have going forward because I
Sober
have a
letters to my drunken self, right?
and it's
Yeah.
going to be what because I have a budget and I'm a better writer and all these things together on a bigger platform.
Mm.
But not caring, I didn't have. I mean, I had friends reading through that to catch typos and as much as I could
Yeah.
and copy editors and there's I'll still read through it and catch stuff, but and I'm like, man, I wish people would buy Sober Letters. That really shows off. But
Yeah.
no, the reviews keep coming in and they're good reviews because the value is still fundamentally there,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the
and
simplicity of it is striking, and I think I like the structure of it. And the simplicity is something I'm drawn to. And we talked about that way in the beginning, just like whether it's
yeah,
movement simplicity or just simplicity in your life, which then allows you to flourish other ways. But I love it. And I just love like the onus of like just do it. Like if you
yeah,
want to do
I
something, just do it. Just
just
try it. Get out
Yeah.
of your comfort zone. Do it. That theme to me, and as the reader, keeps coming through in that. Like, just do it. Like, how are we going to do it? Just take a baby step. And I just think it's great. I love it.
I appreciate that. I thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
good.
So with that, and we're creating, I want to talk, a little bit to give people your background, like why you started Box to Late and you went through that rough patch in your life. And we didn't get into like your bio here because I think where you're at today is just it's great what you're doing now. But is there something to, and you talked about this a lot. You grew up in the projects. You grew up in
Hmm.
a kind of a single mom home. You were very poor growing up, but you didn't realize that, you said, until you got a little bit older, maybe high school and
Right.
college, and got around other people, and then you started caring about your past, and you got a little resentful of it. So, and then I don't know if that led you to drinking and alcoholism and then recovery, but not caring what other people think. Is the book kind of a lesson, almost a letter back to yourself a little bit too, because you realize that
I
during that
just
little stretch you did.
I wrote that, the topics aren't, chosen at random. I
Right.
picked the areas where I felt I really struggled growing up. Or not just growing up, but in particular, there's kind of a time period, we'll say from 19 to 27. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That I really struggled, and that with a lot of those issues with the relationships and how I was best spending my time,
Yeah.
and the hard work. Interestingly enough, being the longest chapter in the first one, uh, I really I don't think I perhaps worked as hard as I could or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And or at least at that point I probably did, but
Yeah.
prior to not much.
Yeah.
And I realized that those areas, if you get those things under control, you're really not going to be motivated by external things. You'll be too busy and too focused on what matters, and what matters is your satisfaction in life. Like at the end of the day, that's like if you can look in the mirror and be like, I like that guy, that's okay. You're gonna be surprised though, or you would be surprised how many people can't do that. Like I'm
Yeah.
a big fan of the person I see in the mirror. Not just I like that person, but I respect that person, and I would try to make other people. I'd like to be able to say, I think I'm a good example, to be able to say that
Yeah.
to yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, and that really does come with not caring, because when you are not caring what other people think in the sense of what makes you popular, what makes you well received, because those ideas, they tend to lead you astray. Not intentionally, I think that when you pursue
Yeah.
when you want to be liked,
Yeah.
you're not going to do what makes you respected, and respect is enduring and transcendent. but being
Yeah.
liked is like temporary,
Yeah.
and it does not apply to everybody.
Right.
Other
Right.
things that make you like to one group will not make you like to another, but respect tends to be
Yeah.
um, a little more, what's the word I want? Permeating.
Yep. Yep. And
That's whole like self-trust first, right? So
Yeah,
like have it in you and be comfortable with yourself before you even like don't
like
bend for other people. It doesn't mean you don't respect them or do things or
right.
go out of your way for others, but it's like that internal can you look at yourself and be comfortable? you know,
yeah.
I always laugh. My kids, I have 3 little kids, and my daughter, we have a nice SUV car, and then we have a little car that's our bang around car, right? If she could pick any day, she wants to be in the little car. She just likes it better. She doesn't know, you know what I mean? So like every
Right.
time I come back and that my kids are like, I love this. I love my house. I love my room. I love this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
step back on my personal thoughts of like, it is great. Everything I have is great. And they're so confident and happy where they are. They don't know, like you said, like that bigger scheme of what else is there,
Hmm.
uh, and it's
Yeah.
very, very, again, enlightening for me to see that from just like such a simple brain of a kid to be like, this is what I like.
Right.
I don't
Right.
care what it is. This is what I got.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, I think it's people in our age range. Ed and Al, I think you're the same age. I'm a little bit older, but and again, coming back to the social media, it's like people are figuring out how to use this thing. I think the younger generations actually got it better because they're learning how to use it real time,
Real
and they
time.
see it
Yeah.
right. And it's like me at 40, I'm like, dude, you're just posting all the best moments of your life that are few and far between. Or you're taking the best shot, you're taking the best photo, and it's like you're not sharing your failures. You know what I mean? It's like you can't learn if somebody's just posting the end result, like seeing the process. And I think social media, I think people like you've shared your story, you went through a ton of struggles, and it's like, if I went through this and I'm coming out where I am today, it's like, how bad is it that your boss doesn't like you, or that like you don't, like you're just behind 1 month's rent, or
Right.
but you're still employed. Like I think you've said before, like everyone's been through your sort of fucked up at some point in life, maybe worse, maybe better. And
Hmm.
so when you understand that, it's that perspective thing. When you put that in perspective, you can open up that lane and say, all right, I'm going to take on this one small challenge and just start chipping away at those mountains. I think that's something that kind of resonates with your story and probably in that book.
Yeah, I try to keep that in perspective. It
Yeah.
really, or rather, keep problems in perspective, because you don't ever want to start thinking that you're special.
Yeah.
Certainly not when it comes to hardship,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I think the worst way to not relate to people is to think you're worse than them rather than better. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because at the very least, arrogance tends to come with some other valuable qualities, especially if one could argue that the arrogance is earned. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you start to try and view yourself as special based on the pity, or based on the tragedy that you've experienced, or the pity that people should have for you, then it's a race to the bottom, and that does has no value.
Yeah.
There's no value in making yourself the worst off, or seeing your situation as the worst.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's like the very antithesis of gratitude. It's entitlement,
Yeah.
but like, why should you be entitled to anything kind of deal where you're sitting here listening to the person
Yeah.
talk about woes me and their issues and all? You want to feel bad, but you're just kind of like, man, shut the fuck up. Like that's your whole reaction. Like that's not
Yeah.
what you should have, but that's what
Yeah.
you do have,
Yeah.
you know.
That's right.
And
Well, yeah, man. It's like, yeah.
I never let myself get sucked into thinking that my problems are different or unique. I had
Yeah.
problems and I got through them. I think anyone can get through them, and if they can, I don't hold them.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think poorly of them.
No, dude, you have a
But
website and articles and blogs on exactly how to get out of that mindset,
yeah,
you know?
and if they
Yeah,
don't, they
so
don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. But the
Yeah.
last thing I'll do is ever let myself think that my type of problem was unique,
Right.
because it wasn't. And I always maintain that I'm no different,
Right.
or better or worse than anyone else. I just made certain choices, and you can make the same choices too. We all have that ability.
Yeah.
I
But
think
I'm
people,
Go ahead.
I think people, there's a couple of things that the one, first, regardless if it's positive or negative, for some reason we like to have that uniqueness. So like in my world, like people come in and be like, "Well, I was told I have the worst arthritis ever." I'm like, congratulations! Like, are you
Like, yeah, like
excited
what do you want?
or
Like,
not? Like,
Yeah.
okay, but like, guess
I
what? It's actually not that unique. This situation isn't, and like, there's that person who is like, oh, but it's different for me. Oh, but it's different for me. Oh, but it's different for me. When the algorithm, or like, again, if you come back to basics of the movement basics, your self-trust, your basic social determinants of health, like, are
yeah.
you doing all of those first? And then let's deal with the one issue. So I think there's just something in us that has this I don't know, like to be, we like to be unique, but like everything is unique. For some reason, it feels right to people. And then I'll say on the other end, I have other people who aren't the poor me, but are like, wow, I hate complaining about this because I know there's people who are worse off. And and I'm always like, no, but it's important to you. Like, okay, so your thumb hurts when you're putting your hair up, and that's the only time it hurts. You can complain about that. It's important to you. It affects your day. And they're like, yeah, but I know people, like somebody's father's, in the hospital really sick. And I'm like, it's okay to take care of
right.
you. And so
Yeah.
it's almost like the other end of that, where some people are like, man, they beat themselves up for caring about something because they know other people are worse.
Right. And
Yeah.
and and there's a lot of things that we can get into and try and dissect the reasons for that type of behavior.
Yeah.
But I think one of the overriding ideas is that everyone wants to feel special. They want to
Mhm.
feel unique.
Yep.
And there are different ways to go about it. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, one of the ways to do that is negative, or negative attention. Like
It's the easier way to get attention, right?
right. I always
Yeah.
say, if you can't get it through respect, you'll get it through
Pity.
attention. You
Yeah.
get it through being, because you got to remember, it's just like your ego doesn't really know the difference between positive and negative. That's you thinking about it. All it knows is attention, me, right?
Yeah.
So you either get it by solving problems and becoming valuable, and that's difficult, right? That's work. So a lot of
Yeah.
times what happens is the other way they get it, through virtue of a problem, or you see this a lot today, an innate characteristic. This is one of the reasons why identity politics always devours itself, because you
Yeah.
can't make one group special. And because then what'll happen is the other group will go, I'm more special than you. And then another group comes in, but what about me over here? I'll never forget this story. I mean, it was hilarious to me.
Yep.
They were planning, I think this was back when Trump got elected. I think they were planning a woman's march on Washington. And then out of left field, a woman comes and goes, I think the women of color are underrepresented here. I can't be part of this. And I'm like, that's weird. And then out of nowhere comes a trans woman and is like, trans women are underrepresented. What are we gonna do about that? If you want us to be part of this, you gotta do that. So now, instead of like it being about the idea, that it turned into an infight
Yep.
about how to represent everyone equally.
Yeah.
when the idea was like you're women, right? But that's not
Right.
enough. You got to feel better and unique
Right.
somehow.
Yeah.
And you see that so often today, and it's kind of nuts when you look at it. But
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah. And yeah, I, I mean, mic drop on that one, buddy. Just, I mean, and I know you've said like you don't talk politics, but you've taken that red pill. I've seen that talk too, and
Yeah,
it's
you
just
know,
like,
I look, because I know what I'm looking like. Here's the thing:
yeah,
I couldn't have that stance of not talking about politics and making that an important thing in my life if I didn't put on enough. I was never obsessed with it. I just couldn't
correct,
understand it. So I went and looked, because because
yeah,
because I think a good way to learn is to always assume you're incorrect, and then get out and try to correct yourself.
yeah,
And so I said, okay, my stance about politics may be incorrect. Let me go and
yeah.
see what I don't know. And I've actually learned quite a bit.
Me
But
too.
all it's done is reinforce my. In fact, I mean, if you want a dire prediction here,
Yeah,
my
I'll
my,
take it.
my feeling is barring an all out, barring an alien invasion or like a developed nation, not China, um,
Right.
deciding to turn against the United States,
Yeah.
I am convinced that this place as we know it, we won't see it physically disintegrate because appearances are important. People want symbolic victories, and also they want symbolic
Yep.
status quo.
Yep.
What's going to happen is a slow, not so. Moderately paced by the end of our lifetimes, uh, fracturing where the president will be no more than a figurehead. Because right now it is kind of that way, but people forget
Yeah.
that we got to the point where Donald Trump was elected. And I have nothing against his politics. I don't know him, but you have to remember what that signifies. This signifies one that people were so fed up with how things were going. No one ever asked that question. Like they just go, "We elected Trump." It's like,
They
well,
always say
why?
it's the
Right?
symptom, right? It's a symptom, not the cause.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
they don't look at it, and they don't realize that this is a man who was famous for building casinos and celebrity TV, effectively a celebrity. You ever see Idiocracy? This is a great movie.
I haven't seen
And one
it.
of the so I think you haven't seen it.
No, no. I'm writing it
Great,
down.
I suggest you check it out. I watched
Yeah.
it one morning when I was supposed to be studying for a physics exam, and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
But one of the most telling things that has so the general plot is it's the future, and all this the smart people have stopped breeding,
Yeah.
and all the stupid people bred, and now we're all idiots, and the whole society is an idiocracy.
Yeah.
But the most telling thing, the president was elected by, I think he won a reality TV show where he had to kill people or something like that. And I was just like, that's incredible. And
Yeah.
this movie came out like 10 years, like over 10
Right.
years ago.
Right.
I
Right.
was like, that's incredible
Yeah. Yeah.
that happened. But
Yeah.
no one sees that because people want they want symbolic victories. They want what feels good and
Right.
looks good. Instead of Thomas Sowell said it best, the last 30 years or 3 decades have
Yeah.
been largely about replacing what works with what feels good, and
Yeah,
that's
man.
where we're at.
And look, man, like the heaviness of all that to what we're doing is just like we're trying to be a self-improvement podcast of like taking care of
Right.
your injuries and your pain and being more physically fit and taking the health insurance and the companies out of the mix by owning it yourself. But it's that mindset that it's the low-hanging fruit for somebody. I want to feel good about this part of my life so I can ignore all the pain over here and everything
And
that's in me. And that leads to people grouping with others that have that mindset, and now no one's looking internally. Like no one's
yeah,
just looking to be their best selves.
no one's
And
looking
that's what
internally.
and that's our message. That's your message. That's like your whole platform is look at
and and,
yourself and get better.
and
And that's going to be
people
ours, you know?
people really don't want to deal with pain,
Nope.
and I was having a discussion with somebody the other day on Facebook, the worst place to have discussions because there's no character limit. I realized
I
it.
know, I know.
So
I'm
so
not on
but I was
Facebook. I
having a
can't do it.
discussion, and I was pointing out that he was like, what are we gonna do about healing a trauma? And I'm like, you gotta understand, trauma is part of life. It's not a thing we get rid of and run away from. Trauma, and the trauma's been such a part of life that at one point, is what I said this on Twitter. I was taking from the conversation and quoting it,
Mhm.
that at one point, that even bringing a life into this world is so traumatic that at one point it killed almost 25% of the people who did it, right? Or the women who did it. Uh,
Right.
so like trauma
Yeah.
is just here to stay. Now how you got to deal and work through it, and then you
Yeah.
get a set of qualities based on that that make it easier to go forward. That's where these memes come out, where it's like, good time, hard times create strong men
It's my
create
favorite
good
quote. It was one of
times.
my favorite quotes.
And you see that, and that comes from this idea that yes, life is hard, but you adapt and deal with it when it's
Yeah.
not.
I mean,
Historical, if people
yeah.
study, like R versus K selection in societies,
Yeah.
the thing that makes a difference, what determines whether a civilization is going to be reproductive or carrying capacity dependent, is whether it's in a cold harsh environment or not, right?
Yeah.
Because the cold harsh environments tend to make you figure out things quickly because they're difficult. you
That's
don't you
right.
don't you know
Dude, so many parallels to a podcast we just did. Me and Al about, again, we're just doing pain management and physical therapy, but it's like we're talking about how pain is part of life. Like
Yeah.
people are afraid to come to her and get better, or or confess, like, I can't do this because it hurts. And she's like, yeah, it's gonna hurt. Like, you're coming to me, like, you're gonna work through the pain. People think that I can't do something because it
Yeah, but,
hurts.
and then I mean that was our healthcare issue, right?
Yeah.
So
And
like that,
it's a metaphor. It's a huge
right?
metaphor.
I mean, from a rabbit hole, like pain is a symptom, and it's a symptom. It's a vital sign of something, and
Yeah.
could it be physical? Maybe, but
Yeah.
I think from a medical side, we've gotten so tailored to be like, let's fix the pain, let's fix the pain from this structure. When it's like, wait a minute, you feel this when you're like this, and you're like this because you're stressed out because of this and that. And okay, so I could teach you to use your shoulder blades, and I could teach you to breathe a little bit better, but what is the source of all of this? And it's well beyond physical movement. However, if you have your basics and you care for your body, your ability to handle those traumas and those pains is so much more.
hmm
If you
Yeah.
are physically prepped and you're not exhausted, I'm thinking back to our boxing conversation. I'm like, I'm thinking about all this stuff, and I haven't even gotten hit in the head yet. Right?
yeah.
So like all of a sudden my freaking brain is flopping around, and
Yeah.
now I still have to focus. like I can't, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just so much of building adversity in people, and building the ability to just handle things. We're not doing that as a medical society, and I think that's causing a lot of other
Yeah.
issues. If you're mentally strong, if you're physically strong and mentally strong, you handle whatever comes your way. And it doesn't mean it doesn't suck.
No,
And it
right.
doesn't mean it's not hard, but
That's right.
your ability to still get up and not curl in bed is there. So.
That's right. That's right. I'm glad that we got that heavy on that stuff, because like talking DC all the way to society, we always say it starts at the individual level, and it's like we're not doing that as a society. So like that's why we wanted to have you today, Ed. It's just like you're one of these people who says it starts with yourself, and if you start with yourself and you're looking inward, you can tackle the problems. And by the way, then you'll group with other people that have that mindset, and you can
Absolutely.
partner with them, and you can grow together, and you can rely on them, but you won't know, you don't have to fall back on them, and you won't have that sense of insecurity in yourself. You just know that you got other people, like people that when you reach out, it is actually truly needed for help and
Yeah.
things like that.
Absolutely. I agree.
Okay, so hey man, this is awesome. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being our first guest. Where can people find you? edlatimore.com, I think, is your website, right?
Yeah, I'm Ed Latimore on the whole internet. You know, I'm Ed Latimore on Instagram, Twitter. My website is edlatimore.com.
Yep.
And send me a message. I pride myself on responding to everything.
I can attest to that. I can attest to that. So, great conversation. Thanks for being our guest. Maybe we'll do it in the future. Go down more of that red pill rabbit hole that I love to talk about sometimes. But look for Ed on social. And this has been our first guest appearance on the Body Movement Podcast. Ed, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Hey, no problem, man. Thank you again.
We'll see everyone on the next episode.
So keep dreaming. Yeah. 1, 2, 1.